Neil Oliver, isn't it critical that we have a cynicism about a policy which risks driving millions of us here in the UK into poverty?
Yes, Dan. I think I can only imagine that Boris Johnson has his eye on the international speaking circuit, to rake in the millions, because, if you're going to get on that gravy train, there's only one song that you need to sing, and it's all about the green agenda. So he's got his eye on the prize there. I suspect this is an audition for being a kind of an Al Gore 2.0. The corrosive cynicism that's been talked about, it's what they accuse others of is what they themselves are guilty of. As you say, world leaders turning up at Sharm el-Sheikh, in their inevitable jets to lecture the proles about cutting their use of fossil fuels and their output of CO2, and they've come to lecture us about eating less meat while they sit down to menus featuring beef and chicken and salmon and sea bass and cream sauces. This is not leadership that we're seeing now. It's desperation. It's trolling us proles on a galactic scale. Net zero is a fool's game. The International Energy Agency says it will be 2207 before we could be beyond fossil fuels. And the Biden administration concedes that CO2 eradication cannot and will not happen before 2242. That's more than 200 years from now. And in the meantime, the policies that are preaching are condemning hundreds of millions of the world's poorest to poverty, starvation, death on a global scale. And they're, at the same time, in their cynicism, they're deliberately ensuring that the populations of their own countries are plunged into fuel and food poverty for the first time in generations. This is the reality. Germany, for heaven's sake, the standard bearer of all things green. The Germans are cutting down old growth forests so that they've got firewood, and they're taking down a wind turbine farm so that they can get at the coal underneath so that they can keep some of the lights on. That's happening, and yet these corrosively cynical sock puppet world leaders, whoever's pulling their strings or operating them from within, are continuing to preach this nonsense.
And Neil Oliver, you say that actually there is no climate emergency.
I do. There is no climate crisis. That is my absolute understanding of the data. This is being pushed on us. This is the main point, though. The main point is that even if there was a climate crisis, what's being pushed at us and painted green is not green in the slightest. You might as well call it the greed agenda, because it's just another opportunity for money making by the usual suspects. It's the continued rape of the planet we're supposed to be saving to get access to rare earth metals and rare earth minerals on an unprecedented scale. There's nothing green about it. It's an absolute fallacy. This idea that CO2 is a pollutant is pernicious nonsense. It's food for plants. You want the greening of the planet. This idea that it's CO2 that drives the warming of the planet is back to front. It's as though aliens from outer space looked down at Earth and saw a horse-drawn cart and made the assumption that the cart was pushing the horse. Rising CO2 follows global warming. It doesn't cause it.
And Neil, like we've seen with so many of these stories in recent years, and obviously two that we're very passionate about, lockdowns and the vaccine, there is no mainstream political opposition, Neil. We're all just meant to be expected to go along with this without questioning. Both the major, well, actually all of the major political parties just agree with this agenda, and we just have to suck it up. To hell with the consequences.
So much is happening at the moment that it's blurring before our eyes what is actually going on. What we're already taking for granted. We've suddenly and mysteriously got Rishi Sunak as Prime Minister, Jeremy Hunt as Chancellor.
How did that
happen? That's the loser in the election contest, followed by one of the most unpopular candidates for anything, are now somehow in charge. And on the other side of the aisle, in the Labour Party, you've just got people who are saying the same thing. In fact, they're in competition with one another to be more and more extreme in the same direction. And I've said it before and I'll say it again, it brings to mind Orwell's Animal Farm, the closing scene thereof, where the animals look in at the window, where where the pigs have invited the human farmers to a meeting in the manor farm. And the animals look in and they cannot see where the humans end and the pigs begin, because they've all become the same. They've all become the same. And that's the situation they're in. And the corrosive cynicism is everywhere, Dan. Tonight I watched a clip of Prince William, tin-eared, it barely begins to describe it, after him and his entire royal family uttered not a syllable about the incalculable mental harm that was caused to millions of people, children included, by months and then years of lockdown. And then now he sits down with millionaire footballers to talk about opening up about feelings and mental health in the run-up to the Qatar World Cup, where Beckham and Gary Neville and the rest of the hypocrites are going to go out and trouser millions of pounds from a Qatari government that declares homosexuality is illegal, sentences gay people to imprisonment or death, potentially, where the stadiums were worked to death, 6,000 immigrant workers. And he takes that opportunity to consider talking about feelings. This corrosive cynicism is across the board. And as I say, it's all happening at the same time. And no wonder people are losing track of what is actually going on, because you don't get a chance to take a breath and review the situation. But we are being played for fools, and we are being trolled by the best in the business.